Hello, welcome to Reading with Mo and to my year-in review wrap-up video. Today we're going to be looking at the stats on my Goodreads app and seeing how or kind of just like reflecting on how my reading year went. I only have the stats from this app, unfortunately. I know a lot of people use Storygraph. I'm considering about switching over to that one this year. I'm just like so lazy when it comes to tracking things. Like I did try doing like an Excel spreadsheet before, didn't keep up with it. Tried bullet journaling before, didn't keep up with that. So far the only thing I've really been consistently able to stick with is Goodreads, but let me know what you guys think. Do you guys like Storygraph? Should I try and make the switch over? I don't know. I'm still thinking about it. It's still early enough in the year where I can switch up and try something new and see if it works or not. So yeah, we'll see. More thoughts to come on that eventually. But anyway, my year wrap up and review for 2022. Let's just get straight into the stats. So hello, it's Editing Mo jumping in real quick. So spoiler alert, I was able to actually download Storygraph and I've been using it over the past few weeks and I am loving the stats it's giving me so far. So I didn't realize you could actually import all your Goodreads information into there. So later on in the video, we're going to be looking at those stats. So yeah, that's coming up, but back to the video. I've been keeping track of my stats on Goodreads since 2018. So I have my information on there from 2018 through now. So in the previous year, 2021 was the lowest amount of books I have ever read in a year since I've been keeping track on the app. And what's funny is the year before that was the highest amount of books that I've ever read before keeping track on Goodreads. So yeah, 2020 was like 190 books, something like that, crazy, the most I've ever read in a year. The year of 2021, I think was about 80, so like less than half of what I had read in 2020. So for the year of 2022, I had set my reading goal to 100 books, which I feel like is pretty doable for me, which I have consistently hit every year except last year. This year, 2022, I was able to read 142 books. That comes to a whole total page count of 50,538 pages read. So that's about 20,000 more pages than I had previously read than the previous year. And I feel like my numbers are a little bit skewed because sometimes I'll put DNFs on there, sometimes I won't. So like all of these numbers probably come with a certain margin of error in that I know there's some books that I DNF'd that I got further enough into the book that I felt like I could count as towards my year goal, and there were some that I DNF'd that I didn't count towards my year goal because I didn't really read that much into them. So yeah, like I said, these stats are not like 100% accurate, I don't think, but they're all I have to go off of, so this is what we're gonna do. So as far as the shortest book that I read last year, that goes to Recitative by Toni Morrison. This one was only 77 pages, and it's a short story, so technically like even the short story within that book was less than that, like maybe 20 something pages, 30 something pages. The longest book that I completed last year was The Mad Ship by Robin Hobb. This was the second book in the Live Ship Traders series. This one was 915 pages. All in all, that comes to about an average book length in 22 of 355 pages, which when I was looking back at the previous years is kind of my average. The average book I read tends to be 355. That was pretty much consistent across the board. No matter if I was reading more books in the year or less books in the year, my average still fell within about 350 pages. So the most popular shelved book that I read last year was Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, which definitely isn't surprising. Typically for me, they usually tend to be classics that take this spot for me. So apparently 3.4 million almost people have added this to their shelves. So yeah, not surprising. It's a very well-known and for a lot of people, one of their favorite classics of all time. And the least shelved or popular book that I read last year was McSweeney's 63, which is not surprising. It's a literary journal, which I know not a lot of people read. And this was a literary journal that was published also last year, so also a newer release. Only 171 people have shelved this book, and I think it's just so beautifully designed. I just randomly came across it one day in Barnes & Noble during their hardback sale in 2021, and I had to pick it up and see, and now it's sparked my love for McSweeney's. I actually just bought a whole bunch of them. I haven't even shown you guys yet. I was able to find some at my local used bookstore, but I actually only gave this book a 3-star rating because It's like a short story anthology. Basically, you're gonna like some, you're gonna not like some others, but I think it's a really cool concept and I definitely support it. So for my average reading rating for 2022, my average rating was a 3.5, which is actually the lowest I've ever had. Looking back at the other years, my average reading tends to be a little bit higher, around like 3.6, 3.7. I think there might have even been one year when it was like 3.8, but like I said, it's a little bit skewed because sometimes I'll read a book if I DNF it and sometimes I won't, so just taking that into consideration as well. I don't think 3.5 is surprising to me because I feel like I do fall very middle of the ground with a lot of books that I read and rate. So yeah, while I think it would be awesome if that rating was a little bit higher, I just know with the amount and quantity of books that I read, it's probably going to fall in that 3.5 to 3.7 range typically. But yeah, hopefully for 2023, at least it'll be maybe a little bit higher, like, you know, 3.6, 3.7 would be nice. Just means that overall I'm picking up and finishing books that I'm enjoying more. And then the last stat that Goodreads gives me is the book that I read that had the highest rating on Goodreads, and that was Fool's Quest, which is the second book in the Fits in the Fold trilogy. This one has a highest rating of an average of 4.52. I gave this book a 4-star rating. So yeah, mine was pretty spot on, close with what the average reading rating for that one was. Yeah, I wish I had more stats to talk to you guys about, like the percentages I read of different genres and like stuff like that. So past Mo wished for more reading stats and future Mo is here to deliver. So on Storygraph, let's just go ahead and take a look at some extra stats that I was able to see about my reading year for 2022. So on Storygraph, they have it broken down into moods. So the top 4 moods of books that I read were emotional, dark, reflective, and mysterious, which isn't really surprising to me. I'm not someone who generally gravitates towards more like happy, warm, fuzzy, feel-good books. Like, I want my books I read to like tear me apart and make me feel things. So that wasn't surprising there. If we're looking at how the pace of the books were, the majority of the books I read were medium paced, and then very few were fast paced, with slow pace being about a quarter of them. Looking at like the books they specifically call fast paced books, I don't really know necessarily how accurate this is or how they come up with these stats. As far as the page count per book, the majority of the books that I read were between 300 and 499 pages, which is about 56% of my reading. So about a third of my reading are books that are under 300 pages, and only 13% was books that were over 500 pages, because I know I do not pick up a lot of chunky books. But I did read 18 books last year that were over 500 pages. Maybe like 17. I think one of these was actually like a DNF, but that's still, I feel like, a lot. 17 books that were over 500 pages. Next, we have the split up of my fiction to nonfiction, only 11% nonfiction. I don't know if I necessarily see that changing too much within the next year, but I do like to have at least some nonfiction in my reading to, you know, add some variety to my reading life. Then next we come to the genres category. Once again, not really too many surprises here. The top genre that I read last year was literary fiction, which I definitely can see that. I read 42 literary fiction books. The second category was thrillers. I read 27 books categorized as thrillers, but I kind of lump thrillers and mysteries together a lot. I read 16 mysteries. After that was historical fiction, which is about 22 books, which was a little bit surprising to me, but I guess also makes sense because I do read a lot of books that are not set in contemporary times. I feel like I also do read a lot of books that are kind of set like in modern day and in the past. Then my next top categories were contemporary, fantasy, mystery, science fiction, horror, classics, dystopian, and then yes, everything else was very, very little, which the rest of the categories, yeah, I feel like are pretty accurate. It also breaks it down into format, but I don't log on my Goodreads whether I read something in print or an audiobook, so these numbers are not accurate. Next, we have the most read authors. So the author I read the most of last year, not surprising, was Robin Hobb, completing the Realm of the Elderling series, 16-book series. 11 of them I read last year. Robin Hobb easily by far beats any other author I read last year. Next, we have Frank Herbert, which also wasn't a surprise. I was completing the Dune series. I read 4 books by him last year. Then after that, all the authors, I've only read 2 books from them. We also get a languages stats, which obviously I read in English. I don't even know what it's showing I read in German. It's showing I read 1 German book. Apparently, when they transferred over my Red Rising book as being in German, that is definitely not true. Then the next chart shows the number of books I read a month and the number of pages I read the month for each month last year. It looks like the month that I read the most books was in January of last year, and the most pages. This chart is definitely kind of all over the place as far as that. It's very much a squiggly line. You could definitely see my mood, how my reading was. In the summer months, I read, I guess, the least amount. I feel like this definitely describes my reading style. I will go a month or 2 with reading everything, and then the next month I'll be burnt out of reading, and I just will, you can definitely see the dips, the high and lows in this chart. And lastly, it's showing my star ratings, which I think we already talked about this earlier in the video. Yeah, it puts me at 3.47 for last year. Some other interesting stats that they're giving me here is that March was my best reading month. My highest average rating was a 4.0 in March. The month that I read the most pages was in January, and that was 5,877 pages, which is crazy to me. So yes, those are all of the additional stats that Storygraph gives me besides stuff I already talked to you guys about in Goodreads I didn't mention again. If you pay for Storygraph Plus, you get even more stats and stuff, but I'm not going to be paying for it right now. Maybe in the future I will, but I just don't see myself needing any more than what they gave me for free is perfectly fine. So those were all of the stats I wanted to share with you guys from Storygraph. Now let's get back to the regular scheduled video. If you guys want to know more about my reading, I am going to be doing a live show within, I believe it's going to be Sunday the 15th of January, and I'm going to be talking about the best books that I read last year, and I'm not sure if I want to do best and worst, or if I kind of want to split them up into two separate live shows. We'll kind of see how I'm feeling. I haven't completely decided yet. Right now, I think I'm kind of leaning towards 2 separate ones. So I have a top 10 books that I've already picked so far of my best books of the year, but my worst, I haven't figured out yet. I haven't really sat down and thought about which were the 10 books that I'm going to say were the worst books of the year, and how I'm going to necessarily figure that out. Because I know I've DNF'd more than 10 books, but then I know I've finished some books that I've given low ratings to. So yeah, that's all just something I'm going to have to figure out. Also, yes, I did do 2 live streams. One has already gone up live and happened this past Sunday while you guys are watching this video. And so I'll leave the link to that down below if you want to check it out. And if you want to not miss the next one, it is this upcoming Sunday, and which I will also leave the link for. And we're going to be talking about the worst books of 2023. One other stat that I have for you guys that I feel like is very interesting is the percentage of books that I read last year that were 2022 releases. So of the 142 books I read last year, 78 of them were published in 2022. So that means that my reading, I think, is pretty much split between new releases and backlist stuff. Yeah, 2022 releases made up about 55% of what I read last year, which is kind of what I want to keep it at. I feel like I really like that split, in that I'm getting to a lot of new books that are current and new that people are talking about, as well as being able to read some backlist stuff that's been sitting on my shelves for a while, and books that are classics and things like that. Books that have just been not published recently. So I think I want to definitely keep that kind of split going forward for the rest of my foreseeable reading future. If you guys have any other reading questions about my reading year of 2022, leave them down below and we can definitely talk about them more there. Also, if you guys want to make any comments about how your own reading year went for last year, we can definitely talk about that as well. And that's it for today. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!